Hey, Narayana, how's it going?
Hi, how are you,
I'm
Kira? It's
good.
nice. Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you here. First time on the show. We just kind of got acquainted with each other like a month or two ago, right? So, new friends.
Yes, yeah, I think it was February, early February when
Okay.
we first spoke.
Yeah, happy to finally have you here. And we'll get to meet in person soon too at Norwalk, which is exciting. But yeah, I'm excited to have you here to talk about the moon phases and the lunar cycle in particular. You wrote this book, Moon Signs,
I
um,
did.
which is gorgeous and has so much. There's so much in it. There's so much about the moon here. Um, it's called Moon Signs: Unlock Your Inner Luminary Power, and um, and yeah, looking through this made me want to. I kind of got the idea of like we should do an episode about the lunar cycle. It's something we haven't talked too much about, and it's something that I'm not super like I know about it, but it's not something I spend a ton of like time on or even work with a lot with my practice. So um yeah, I'm excited to dive into it some more because it's there's some like nice little like pieces of wisdom there within the lunar cycle. So we're going to talk about the lunar cycle. We're also going to talk about the progressed lunar cycle because that's something that doesn't really get talked about enough too. So yeah, I guess to get started, we should have you introduce yourself. Do you want to share your sun moon rising and a little bit about your practice and yeah, what you do in astrology?
Of course, yes. My name is Narayana Montúfar. I am Taurus rising, Scorpio sun, Leo moon. But I do have triple Sagittarius, so that's good.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Lots of
um,
fire.
Lots of fire, which makes sense that I'm from Mexico. I'm originally from Mexico City, but have been living in California for many years, like 16 years. And I I was always interested in astrology and spirituality, but I started my career in astrology through editorial, actually. I was in the music industry originally, and then I moved into working for horoscope.com. And I was an editor. I held many editorial positions. And so um, slowly but surely, I just started learning and taking classes on the weekends. And, there was a time in my career, I was doing editorial for a while. And it's not that I didn't like it, but I just kind of fell in love with astrology. I decided that my next step was going to be just to be an astrologer. And it was a tough decision at the time, but it's funny, right? When you make those decisions, all of a sudden, the universe just pushes you
Yeah.
forward. And yeah, they made the switch. And then I worked with astrology.com. I still work with them. So I'm the senior astrologer there. And so I have a lot of experience creating astrology content, many different types. But I was holding both careers for a while, and it was just getting really intense. And so last year during Libra season, I decided to you know, uh, just focus on my astrology practice that I've been nurturing for years and just trying to, for it to take off. And so yeah, I think it was this book, ever since this book came along, I just I said, I just want to be an astrologer, and I'm an artist as well. So all my art is based on astrology. I actually came to my art career through astrology because I always liked art, right? I always went to open studios and museums and everything, but I have a Venus Mercury conjunction, fifth house stellium,
Mm,
Venus square the note. So it was just like, okay, I need to try this. And so I found my artistic career through astrology. I don't think I would have ever, who knows, right? But I don't know. So it's been kind of amazing to see both of them take off. And so One of
Awesome.
my favorite things to do is to paint bird charts. That's when I'm like, in my happy place.
Mm.
And yeah, so I give readings every single week. I have like 3 readings. I write horoscopes. I write astrology. I am the in-house astrologer for House of Intuition, and I write for Cosmo and other publications.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The Mercury Venus conjunction is like one of my favorite signatures, and I see it so much on like within our community, so many amazing astrology writers, so many amazing writers, I should say, within our community have that conjunction, and I'm definitely jealous of it. It's so nice. And I forgot that you're from Mexico City. I was just there a couple weeks ago for the first time, and I fell in love. It was so beautiful. My Mexico City falls on my sun midheaven line, so I was just like really feeling it. I was like nice and sunny, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Such a beautiful city. Yeah. So when did Moon Signs come out? When did you write it?
So it's really funny that you asked, because I was finished, the whole. So it's really funny because like I came from web editorial, right? That I was doing that for like 10 years. And the process of writing a book is so different. It's just so much
I'm in the
slower.
middle of it right now. I was like literally just doing that before we hopped on. So yeah, I hear you. Also
Yeah,
came from
it's just,
editorial too.
oh wow, okay. That's how, so you understand how like everything's just so, and you have your book too, right? Your Pisces book.
Yeah, but
So
I don't really count that. I mean, I definitely like, it was a book I wrote, but it was short and I sort of like puked it all out in a very short amount of time. And it definitely wasn't the same type of book writing process that I'm in right now, which is a lot more involved. And yeah, it's a lot.
yeah, I mean, I think that just, I mean, Moon Signs was a very, very long project, but like the funny part about it is that I was finished writing it. This is interesting. When I was having my progressed moon opposition.
Mm.
And see, it was an intense time in my life. Um, I remember, it might be TMI, but I remember writing the last letters with tears in my eyes.
Mm.
Just like, oh,
That's a
just very,
lot.
yeah, very emotional. But it just made so much sense.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just so fascinated with the progressed lunation cycle, because it's just
Mhm.
so like, it's grounding to know, because things are the way they are, but it's grounding to know that certain things have an end, and how things develop, right? So it's really funny because I started talking to the editorial company about this book in 2020,
Mm.
but it came out in, because of COVID, there were many delays. And so this book it came out during Libra season in 2021 in the UK. But then in the US, it's a Sagittarius,
Oh,
like
cool.
with an Aquarius moon. So it came out in December of 2021.
Nice.
Hmm.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm sure it's available like everywhere, whoever wants to check it out. Um, yeah, I'm my progressed moon's currently in Taurus, which is my third house. And of course, I'm like, pouring through this book. And it's going to shift into Gemini sometime later this year too. So I'm excited about that. And have a feeling I'm going to just keep writing. I'm probably going to do some other project right after this, but we'll see. Well, and we'll talk about progressed moons in a bit too. Remind me when's your birthday? I'm curious. I forget. I know we talked about it before.
Yeah, I was born on 11/11/1979.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So
Hmm.
you're a week before me. I'm 11/18.
Right.
So
We're
you
both
have been,
Scorpios.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so you've been getting the South Node on your sun.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been
Yes.
a lot. Yeah. Actually, the south node on my sun wasn't that bad at all. It's kind of parked on my Mars right now. I have Mars at 22 Scorpio. And with Saturn squaring it and like Mars, it's just that's been way worse than I expected.
Yeah, I just feel like the combination of having being stuck between the nodes and Saturn, you know,
Hmm.
it's definitely been a thing, it's you
You're
ups
super
and
fixed. You
downs.
have your Taurus, your Leo. Yeah, I'm sure you're feeling it.
Yes, because I had Saturn on my ascendant early in 2021. So then it came to my sun, right? And
Yeah.
then now it's opposing my moon. So it's like, at least I'm getting it all out of the way.
Yeah, all at once.
But I gotta say, I mean, and that's why astrology is so helpful, because there have been days that I've been just feeling very like just kind of lost. And
Hmm.
my friends will be like, babe, it's okay, um, because also Uranus, right, in Taurus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So at least, like I said, at least I'm getting it all out of the way now, and then I'll be free for a
Yeah.
while.
I hope so too. Yeah. Um, well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the moon and excuse me, lunar cycles. I'm curious, like what brought you towards working with the moon specifically? Yeah, if there's anything in particular, or have you always kind of just felt really connected to the moon?
Well, there are a few reasons why. I have always been, I mean, like the first, toe dipping into astrology after the sun is the moon. And I just remember it being so eye-opening for me, right? Because with my square, because like Scorpio Leo, you
Hmm.
know, um, I just felt like so seen just by knowing my moon sign. And so that's why I've always felt very, very close to the moon. And also, um, I'm a feminist. you know, I, you know, I just like, even if don't say it enough, if I don't post enough about it, I do my type of work in which I, you know, fight the patriarchy. And I just feel like one of the reasons why we have so many problems in this, like, in this like constant fight feels like, right? It's because the moon was demoted, and the moon is a symbol of divine feminine, and so I just felt like it was part of my, like, personal mission to
Hmm.
have that impact on people. And I just feel like the moon sometimes speaks more of a person. It really depends on so many things, the position of the house and the face and all of this, right? But
Hmm.
I just feel like it's such an important part of ourselves. I see it as our night vision, you know,
Hmm.
and because we're taught that we're taught to like carry ourselves in a solar way, like we're starting to see that was wrong, right? But now I feel like we're starting to realize that the moon is our night vision. It's not something that you figure out outside of yourself, right? And so
Hmm.
it's just so just such a private, sacred part of us. And so I it's not that I don't like the sun, of course not, but I'm not gonna lie, when I look at a person's chart, the first thing I see is the moon.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
where, because it speaks to someone's privacy and someone's like behind closed doors personality, right, that you don't see. And so that's why I'm just kind of like obsessed with the moon, and like, because also the moon helps us not only understand ourselves and our needs and our non-negotiables, but also like Stephen Forrest says, is the mother of astrology, right? That's how we figure out that's how astrologers even figure out a lot of, that's how we learn a lot, because since the moon moves so fast, we can really kind of through her learn about other planets and,
Mhm.
you know, even
Yeah.
fixed stars and other things. But yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. It is really that like that focusing point that kind of draws us to certain points and planets and stars and what have you in the chart. That's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I always like to talk about the moon as sort of our instinctive and intuitive selves. And like you said, sort of like what's on the inside, how we respond and react to any sort of external stimuli on that like sort of base, just yeah, instinct level. Um, so yeah, I agree. I mean, the moon speaks so much to who you are, especially I think for people who are born at night. Or were you born past sunset?
I was born at sunset.
At sunset.
So
Okay.
yeah. But I agree, because, and that's what I put in this book, if you were born at night, you most likely resonate more with your moon sign, you know.
Mhm.
I was born at
Yeah.
sunset. So what about you? Are you a
I'm a
daytime or night?
day. I'm a
Night? You're
day.
a
I'm
day?
such a diurnal. I have a rejoicing sun in the ninth house. Yeah, I'm very diurnal. But my moon is the only planet that's subterranean. It's the only planet below the horizon.
Oh.
And it's in Aries in the second house. Yeah. So I admittedly I'm not great with moon stuff. The moon is probably like the planet that I connect to the least, just in terms of like, planetary archetypes. I love my Aries moon and all, but I definitely disregard more lunar things, I think, as opposed to more solar diurnal, you know. I'm definitely more, I stay visible, I stay working, doing all that. And my nocturnal side definitely suffers a bit from it. So maybe this will help a little bit, more in tune with my moon stuff. But yeah, I think, yeah, what you were saying too about like the divine feminine, and just I like to think of the sun and the moon as sort of our two primary, if we're going to take gender out of it too, it's just like these two binaries, like hot and cold, or like dry, moist, and it is true that in today's, not even just today, but society at large from the past, thousands of years, basically have definitely regarded the sun, or we could say the masculine, we could say the diurnal consciousness, what have you, as more important, or just more highly regarded than that of the moon or nocturnal, more feminine consciousness. And I do think astrologers are doing a lot of work to rebalance the scales in that regard. And just like by learning astrology and learning the nuances to you and who you are in your chart, you can start to unpack that in yourself, which is where it really all begins, right? Like unpacking what that means for you. Um, anyway, let's talk a little bit about moon phases. I mean, um, there's the lunar cycle that we're constantly existing within, right? Which is like a monthly cycle, and then we have the moon phase that we were born within. That's like in our birth chart. Um, where are we at right now? We're on the waxing gibbous, right? We're leading up to a full moon.
Yes.
Um,
It's an
so I
intense
guess,
one too.
yeah, it is square Pluto.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, we're recording this on April 12th. We're in the lead up to the Libra full moon, on the 16th. But yeah, do you want to go through just like list the moon phases, and maybe we can talk about each one of those and in regards to like the transiting moon? Because I think that might be a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. So, and that's why I also started with that on my book in a way, because I wanted to I think, I mean, when I have clients that tell me that they want to start working with astrology, right? That's where I go. Following up on what I was saying earlier,
Mm,
um, following the transits of the moon through each one of our birth charts, but how they affect us, but like just working with the lunar cycles, right? Because obviously it gets a little crazy, right? This and that, because the moon moves so fast. Um, it's a little hard sometimes. I mean, you and I, we keep track, but I remember when I started doing that, I just felt like it was like, oh my God, it's just like, well, this is just a lot, like every 2 weeks you have a big lunation. But I do use the lunar cycle. And so it's an ongoing um, cycle that the moon has that lasts for about 28 days. And obviously the cycles have a lot to do with the position of the sun, right? So we can't really talk about moon phases without knowing where the sun is, right? Because the moon doesn't have light itself. It reflects the light of the sun. And so it's always important to know where the sun is. So for example, right now the sun is in Aries, right? And so the moon will form phases according to its position, with the sun. And so it goes kind of this way, right? The cycle begins. I don't know. I'm like kind of in my book, I started with the new moon, but because that's kind of how people see it. But my favorite phase, and I might be crazy for saying that, but it's the balsamic moon phase, right?
I knew you were going to say that.
Just because I've been working with it, and it just feels very just deep, before the moon is new. So for anyone who's listening, the balsamic moon phase is right before the new moon, and it's when the moon is not reflecting any light from the sun, so we don't see the moon in the sky. But it is when even though we can't see her, I mean, we know the moon is there, but like this is when all the goodies from what we've been talking about, like divine feminine energy, or sometimes what's decomposing, sometimes it's the ugly, like what we need to really see, what that this is when our intuition really picks up and it's trying to get our attention. So as much as I can, I try to work with that balsamic moon. It's not always possible, right? But so the balsamic moon is a very special moment. Then after that, obviously we have the new moon. And so it is a double dose of the sign where the sun is, right? Because we have the luminaries in the same zodiac sign. And these are times of new beginnings. We are planting the seed of intention, and it has to do with something that we kind of acquire during the balsamic moon, because the balsamic moon is telling us this is the way to go, or this is what to focus on, right? However, I do like to wait a little bit. I don't plant the seed immediately on that day. I really like to wait a little bit until the moon is gaining light.
Same, yeah.
Because that's when the moon is picking up on the light of the sun, because that, everything's light. And so I wait a little bit. I literally go out and see the shivers there, and I was like, okay, so now I'm gonna write my intentions.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell my clients to do. I said, you don't have to do it right, because they're like, oh my God, I missed the new moon. I was like, you didn't. You're right on time.
Yeah.
And,
I like to
do you
say
do the same?
Yeah, I feel like the balsamic moon phase is this like intense, like drawing inward. Especially my cycle's linked up with the new moon. So I usually get my period on the new moon. And so those couple days before the balsamic moon is very like, low energy, but in a good way, in a way where you really need to like draw into yourself and slow down a bit and just kind of observe. And then that new moon, I like to say like, it's just for sitting in the void of the new moon, like there's no light from the moon. It's just about kind of being in the void, seeing what comes up. I like to have like the intention sort of come to you during the new moon. And then, a couple of days later, when it's finally a waxing crescent, you can actually, the moon can kind of catch your intentions, and it can actually, there's something about the physicality of like the visibility of the moon when you're setting intentions for new things to come. So I definitely agree with that. And I also tell clients and stuff the same.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the waxing crescent. That's when things begin to take form. So this is when you really plant the seed, or even just do mundane, regular things. Like if you want your hair to grow, you do it during this time, right? If you don't, then you do it when the moon is losing light, things like that, right? So after that comes, so we're talking about the waxing crescent, which like the energy builds up and it starts growing, and then we start feeling a little bit more like energetic from this moon, right? And it does work that way. It's kind of crazy how we're just so attuned to it, and you don't even need to be, everyone on this earth is attuned to the moon at one level or another. And so after that, we come to the first quarter moon, which is kind of intense, because every time you see the moon half, it's a quarter moon, either waxing on or waning. In this case, we're talking about waxing. And so that's when the moon is clashing with the sun, right? Wherever the sun is.
The square, right? The square between the sun and the moon, the first square in the cycle.
Right. And so that brings a little bit of a moment of crisis in terms of like what we planted the seed on, or whatever we're trying to work with. And so we might run into obstacles, right, along our path, or something needs readjustment. But it's important to not give up on this phase just because we're running through obstacles, because I feel like this is how we know that squares in astrology provide the tension you need to charge ahead, right? It's not that, I ran into an obstacle. It's like, you ran into an obstacle, but you have to make adjustments and you have to like figure stuff out. I personally love quarter moons because I was born in one. So I'm one of those weirdos that like, because I need that like intensity, right? So sometimes I've even picked quarter moons, to be honest, for people's weddings, or just because sometimes you need that, it's kind of nice to have that like energy. Some people might disagree, but I personally like it. And so after that comes the waxing gibbous moon, right, in which she's all like, the moon is almost full, and it's getting closer and closer to being a full moon, so it's a time of just like growth, right? We're heading to a climax. We're heading to like, it's almost like the manifest. We're almost there, right? It's almost like the last stretch. And then just the energy starts picking up, right? You can feel your calendar getting busy and things are moving.
Yeah.
That's
my natal moon phase. And I feel like I always think about it as like just constantly preparing, like just getting ready. I think of it as like getting ready for a party almost. It's like just having to like do all the things to make sure that the main event's going to be, you know, as spectacular as you hope. So yeah, the busyness of the waxing gibbous is definitely spot on.
Right. And it works, right? With natal placements too. So,
Mm-hmm.
right. So yeah, so we're in the last stretch, right? And it's exciting, right? It's exciting because you can feel that something's coming to fruition soon. And so then the next phase is the full moon, which is what most people, you know, hear about, because you can actually see the moon, and that means the moon is sitting exactly across from the sun in the zodiac. And so full moons are intense because it's an opposition of the luminaries. So it's a lot about balancing the energies of those two zodiac signs, or where the sun and the moon are. And I also meant to say this before I started, every single moon is different, right? That's also what fascinates me about the moon. Like every single day, I see the moon as this shapeshifter, being that just shifts on you every single day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so every single phase of this moon is different, because the moon will be making aspects to other planets. But that being said, every single full moon is different, and it comes with a different energetic costume, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we definitely feel the moon and full moon energy around us, right? People are just running around like crazy. I've heard that hospitals are full, and you just hear ambulances, and it's just like, and everyone wants a piece of you, right? Have you noticed that everybody wants to meet up or hang out during a full moon?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Everything just spikes, I feel like.
It's like a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to say it's like the exclamation point of the month. It's just when we have just like a whole spike of energy on all levels, but especially socially, especially when you think about the moon sort of ruling over like the populace, just like especially, that's a traditional association with the moon. It's just it rules over the public, the
The
people.
public.
So when it's full, it's like everyone's full of something. Everyone's, at the peak, at an emotional, or not even emotional, but just like energetic high, I think. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, one of the ways I started working with the lunation cycle was like trying to keep my schedule lighter on full moon weeks, because I would just tire myself like crazy, like saying yes to writing gigs and saying yes to hanging out and saying yes to, and I was just like, oh no, 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 because I know how it goes, right? Because then the then the dissemination is just intense.
Yeah.
And so we say that full moons, right? Same thing with new moons. They have like a few days in which like you start most likely feeling them before they're actually full, right? But exactly right after exactly the moment that the moon opposes the sun, right after that, then we're in the dissemination phase, right? So after that, then the moon starts losing light, and then we're literally on the other side of the lunar cycle. And so from that moment all the way up to the balsamic moon is when we're like losing energy, or or like things start kind of like ending or moving away from. So then we head to like, do you normally use the waning gibbous moon in a way? What do you see? Because I sometimes, that's the phase that I'm kind of like so about, kind of like.
Yeah, I don't necessarily use it for anything in particular. Again, I don't use the moon cycle enough, I think, but I do love the waning sextile. But that's a little bit, well, the waning gibbous has the trine, which is nice too. And I think that can be
Right.
um, a really lovely aspect to work with. Um, yeah, but I kind of look at the waning gibbous as sort of like it's like the hangover from the full moon. And it's a time for like processing, really. Like I think of it as like, if the waxing gibbous was planning the party and preparing, and the full moon was the party itself, the waning gibbous is sort of like the cleanup,
Cleaning up.
like processing everything that happened, that sort of vibe. That's kind of how I picture it, at least.
Like the next day after the wedding, kind of,
Yeah.
right? So it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So this is the time when I mean, in a more mundane way of speaking, this is when you clean your house. This is when, like, right, kind of like clean up space.
Mhm.
That's the way I see it. And then comes the third quarter moon, right, which is my natal moon sign. So I feel really connected to that. So it's a lot of integration, right? Kind of like start thinking about the entire lunar cycle. And then it's like, okay, that happened in the wedding, and that happened, and that went down. And I'm okay with it, kind of
Mhm.
like putting the pieces together um, in relation to what manifested or what didn't, right? Because sometimes the climax of the full moon is positive, right? Something happened, or you got the job offer or something like that. Sometimes it's like, that didn't really work out, right? So it really
Mhm.
depends on what happened during the full moon. But so the last quarter moon is like a moment of crisis in terms of like integrating everything that happened. That's kind of how
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah, it's sort of
And
like another pivot point, basically, where you have to sort of be like, okay, like you said, all that happened. Now I have to like switch or change or do something in order to process and integrate that for this like next quarter, this next cycle. Um, yeah.
right. And so, yeah, it could sometimes bring a little bit of a crisis of faith, right? In terms of like, oh, that didn't work or whatever. But the good thing is, like, there's always another lunar cycle coming up, right? It might
Mhm.
it doesn't happen in the same sign, same part of your chart, right? But then comes the balsamic right after that. So that's the one I was talking about that I really like. Um, but I think I started with that, so I already kind of talked about that. Um,
Oh, we missed the waning crescent, which is right
oh,
before a
right,
balsamic.
right, waning crescent. So in the waning crescent, um, I think that that's when we feel like the energy just really starting to like go down, 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 down. We're starting to kind of prepare for that balsamic phase in which we just feel a little bit, we're starting to feel that like low, low, low energy, right?
Mhm.
We're
It's like
like,
the last light.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the last, maybe we're like evaluating, kind of like really thinking of what's next. We don't really have all the answers yet because they come in the balsamic moon, but
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of evaluating, thinking what we're going to do in the next lunar cycle. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're just starting to kind of tone down the energy and just being, sitting with that energy of like diminishing light, or kind of like, you know, what's next kind of thing. That's right. And then after that comes the balsamic, right?
Mm. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that waning crescent phase is where you do get that like sun moon sextile too. It's like the last light of the moon before it enters the darkness of the balsamic phase. And so yeah, I wonder if there is a little bit of like insight, clarity that comes during that time before you really start to like draw inward and kind of prepare for the rebirth that is the new moon.
Well, yeah, because because after the last quarter, that's just kind of like, right? Like, oh boy, something, the sextile definitely helps, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
everything's going to be okay. There's another cycle, right? We have time to gather information and or gather the signs, or maybe this is when you if something didn't manifest on the full moon, maybe this is when you get an insight around that, because the moon and the sun are, the luminaries are friendly, right? Of course, it depends on a lot of other things, right? What the luminaries are doing. But yeah, in a nutshell, that sextile should feel mellow, right? Oh, I'm okay with it. Or if something manifested, you're like, oh, that was great. I'm exhausted. I'm just gonna like start taking time off, or like, you know, I did my work, or I got that done, and then kind of start like it says, waning, right? Waning down.
Yeah.
So
I keep picturing like a room with like a light that has a dimmer on it, and how like, you know, there's full light, full brightness at the full moon, and then you slowly start to like turn down the light and it just gets dimmer and dimmer. And that waning crescent phase is sort of like the last light. And then once we get balsamic, the lights are out.
right. I
Yeah.
love that. That example actually.
Yeah. It just
Of
popped in
the
my head.
dimmer. Yeah. I'm big into dimmers, so
Yeah, I mean, it's like necessary, I think, if you want to
I
get the
think so
right
too.
lighting. Um, cool. Yeah. So we have, that's a cycle we go through every month since the beginning of time. And then of course, each one of us were born during that cycle. So we have a natal lunar phase. And yeah, again, depending on where the sun and moon were in your chart, we'll speak to what part of that phase you were born in. I was born like, yeah, 2 days or so before a new moon, or sorry, before a full moon. So I'm like very waxing gibbous. You're born during the quarter, the last quarter phase. I'm curious if you have any thoughts around the natal sun and moon phase, and this is kind of left field, but it's something I think about. And people's relationship with their parents, or their perception with their parents. Have you done any work around that?
Um,
A little bit.
I do see some like, it doesn't always, like, you can't generalize, but I have seen um situations in which people with the new moons, their parents stick together more often than not. People with my moon phase, the last quarter, I think most of their parents are divorced.
I see
Like
it a lot
most
with
of
full
their parents.
moons. I see a lot of full moon divorced
Oh, really?
parents, because it's like
Right.
they're literally like opposite, like they're far apart as
Opposite.
they can be, right? But the waning quarter phase, I see that too. But yeah, I also have seen, again, not like a hard and fast rule, but the new moon phase, or the sun and the moon in the same sign, kind of speaks to like there be, and this all comes from looking at the sun and the moon as representations of the two primary caregivers or parents. So yeah, the sun being the father and the moon being the mother, which isn't always the case, but more generally speaking, it tends to be. So yeah, having the sun and the moon in the same sign kind of speak to like, oh, they're on the same page. And something I've also seen is that it might not be that they're still together now, but like when the person was born or was being conceived, like the parents were in a really good place, or, you know, had a lot of love for each other. I see that with sun moon trines and sextiles a lot too, just a lot more, but I would say like my sun and moon are in signs that don't see each other. My parents have been together for over 30 years, so it's not hard and fast
Right.
rule, but it is something I've noticed. I was curious if that is something you've seen as well.
Yeah, totally. I would say most of these really resonate, but there will be some people here and there that like, no,
Yeah.
and like you said, sometimes they like, with the sun being that, the moon being the mom, sometimes they switch, right? And especially now, right, that more modern times is like, we're not all doing the same thing. Sometimes I see either both of the parents or one of them as Saturn, like
Mm-hmm.
very clear,
Yeah.
like they've just been very like Saturn, like this is both of the parents Saturn,
Yeah.
so but it is something interesting. It definitely, sometimes I ask that just to see the relationship or who's who, right? When
Mhm.
I'm laying the foundation of the person's chart, right? What's their relationship to their mother or their father, depending on what I see. But yeah, it's an
Totally.
interesting thing to do for sure.
Yeah. Cool. I just had to ask that. Um, but yeah, I mean, we did just go through each of the phases, but I'm curious if you have thoughts or yeah, things to comment on or share around each of the moon phases in regards to like the natal chart and how that might show up.
Yeah, well, actually, what I was thinking, the way I did it in my book, let me know if you like that. I was One of my favorite things to do was like to assign keywords
Mm,
to each moon phase baby, because I feel like it really resonates with people,
yeah.
like
Oh yeah, I see.
as,
Okay.
as your like as your like yin yang kind of like DNA, because like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you see that the yin yang relationship with the luminaries, right? I mean, obviously we have Venus and Mars, and there are many different ways in how that could work, but I kind of like that, like the quality of light just being, you know, putting some keywords on your life, and you're like, okay, that really resonates with people for the most part in
Yeah,
like
let's do
readings.
it.
Okay, so and I added a moon sign calculator just because, well, you know how astrology is. It's like, I really don't like lists, the apps that are like lists. I always tell my clients, like, you need to learn how to, like, you see a chart, like it's like
Yeah,
the circle, everything's a circle, the sun, the moon. So it's like, get
right.
used to seeing a circle. I mean, I kind of had to do the list just like, because if people don't even know their moon, right, you kind of have to, it's like the window. And so for new moon, the keywords are going to be similar to kind of what we talked about, right? It's just like, instead of like transiting cycle, right, of what the cycle of the moon that we were talking about, this is going to be more like, what's your luminary imprint that you carry in this
Mm,
lifetime? Um, so for new moon, I use instinctual, initiating, creative, and spontaneous.
love
Um,
that.
do those resonate with you?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely see that in new moon people. Spontaneous, I really like too. I think that something I notice a lot in new moon people is just they just have this newness to them, like almost this like youthful aspect to who they are. And they're just kind of down to try things and yeah, be spontaneous and just like um yeah, again, the newness or the youthfulness to that natal moon phase is really stands out to me. So I like spontaneous there, especially. But yeah, of course, like initiating and creative, instinctual, those all feel really
And
spot
they kind of
on.
like be behind the scenes. Like that's my husband's moon phase, and it really
Mm,
resonates.
yeah.
Yeah, because he has that kind of like child, kind of like, everything's gonna be okay,
Yeah.
whatever,
It's like they
kind of.
can't really see what's, in the distance. Not to say that they can't, but that's kind of the energy of it. It's like, it's a lot more present, I think, in some ways, because it's like, what are we doing now? Let's start something new. Let's initiate. Yeah, for sure.
No, totally. I agree with you. It's not that they can't see it. It's just they're not concerned. They're not like seeing that far out in,
Yeah.
in the future. They're like, all I care is I'm here with you kind of thing,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um, and people with new moon, like born under the new moon, right? What I tell my clients is like, they kind of have to create a little bit more awareness, right? Because with working with their birth chart, because like it's harder to know when the moon is responding and when it's the sun responding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like it's a little bit harder for them to figure out which planet is the one. Is that your
Mm-hmm.
ego, or is that your emotions, or is that so because it's the same sign, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, and they
Yeah.
probably feel more attuned to their sun sign because of that also.
That's true.
um
Yeah. I feel like new moon people, I mean, the sect of the chart matters regardless if it's day or night, but it's always interesting when it's someone with a new moon and, it's like new moon in the day versus in the night it's really interesting because in the daytime, it's like the sun is already the dominant luminary. But in the nighttime, it's like you get this, very dark moon, but new moon as the dominant, luminary, the main source of consciousness. And yeah, that's always interesting to kind of pour into in a birth chart.
mhm. Yeah, and especially if there's another planet there too, right? To make things more complicated.
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
so for the waxing crescent moon, the words are growth, activation, manifestation, expansion. Um, so it's these people are like here to like in because in a way this is more initiation,
Mhm.
right? Like kind of
Mhm.
like work, starting to work towards something, starting to like build something. And so yeah, I see this as like it's an interesting phase, I would
It reminds
say.
me of like Beyonce. Beyonce is someone that just comes to mind when I think about this phase because she has Virgo sun and Scorpio moon. So we get this like, the
Mm,
waxing crescent. Um, and she's definitely someone who's just like has the vision and is like puts in like kind of is able to like put in the work or put in the steps towards manifesting that vision. I don't know, that's just what came to mind for me is the expansion, the
mm,
manifestation, like you actually have the tools to like start making it happen to get it done. And that's that light, the moon has some light to work with.
right, and it's growing. So and also, well, the position of the luminaries, that the fact that they're friendly to each other really helps. So it
Mm-hmm.
almost feels like having the wind at your back for whatever you want to manifest. It's kind of a nice, not that the
Yeah.
other lunar phases are bad or anything like that, but it's just a nice, it's an easier kind of energy for making stuff happen. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
What I found out though is that sometimes, not always, people with this face can't be late. They, you know, they bloom later, like
Mm.
sometimes, not always, but um that's one of the characteristics that I wrote for them. Um So then we were talking about the first quarter moon. We were talking about that the transiting moon being a little bit of a moment of crisis, challenge, because the luminaries are clashing. So this is what we were talking about. But it's the first quarter moon. So I mean, this could also speak of like parents being divorced, right? Maybe really early during the child's life, right? Because
Yeah.
it's the first. And so the truth is that people with this moon sign, natal moon phase, might find it a little hard to integrate, right? The sun moon relationship, because it's a square, right? And then it's like a clash, 40 degrees. But once they master it, right? Once they master that clash, they can see a lot of success, because these moments of crisis, you know, these natal energy of crisis, even though it can be really intense, it could fuel these people to really be, to do whatever they want, you know. So I think that it's important for them to know this, especially if they're young, they're discovering this at a young age, right? It's like, yeah, you were kind of thrown in a little bit of intensity in family or certain situations, but once you master those two signs, you can really make a lot of stuff happen, right? Especially because the moon is growing in light when they're born.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like one word that often comes to mind for these quarter phases, but especially the first quarter, is like struggle. And I think a lot about, I think it was Dane Rujar, who compared the lunar cycle to the growth of like a plant, you know, like a seed. And you know, the new moon would be like planting the seed, and then it's starting to like, you know, sprout a little, I don't know what you call it, a little tendril underneath the earth. And that would be that first the waxing crescent. And then when you get to this first quarter, it's when the plant is trying to break free from the dirt and like reach, you know, break the soil basically, and reach the air and the sunshine above it. And it's like that initial struggle or challenge or crisis moment of like having to overcome a particular challenge. And yeah, I feel like for people born during this first quarter moon, it's a similar thing. And it's likely like a challenge that they had to surmount at, you know, in their youth, but it kind of gives them this like fight that, like, you know, they're kind of probably frequently running into struggles or, you know, conflicts or challenges to like surmount and to move through. So yeah, I feel like this is like the placement of someone who is just really good in a crisis, or really good in like high pressure, you know, environments where they have to just like make decisions and, you know, constantly kind of solving problems.
Totally. I love that. You know what I imagined when you were talking about like these, the plant? Turtles have been showing up for me a lot lately in my dreams. So I was thinking that this can also resemble when the turtle's coming out of the egg and it's trying to get to the ocean. That moment of crisis of like, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah, that first like struggle of like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I love that. And so waxing gibbous is the next, and the keywords are evaluation, gestation, analytical, perfection. Yeah, because you're in the last stretch. And so let's say you're talking about, you know, in the first quarter, people that are like making decisions and right, that moment of crisis. Well, these waxing gibbous, it's more like I'm almost there, but this is also like a very growth, right, focused moon phase. And so these people are busy. Like, da, 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 da. Oh my God, so many things are happening for them, right? And this is why it's so important that we never compare ourselves to other people, right? Because like people that were born in these things, you know, their friends probably are always like, oh my God, stuff always happens for you so easily.
Story of my life. Oh my God. I'm like,
Right?
no, it's just that I'm constantly, yeah, it's the perfectionism. It's like the always do it. There's always stuff to do. And, there's never, yeah, there's never like a pause moment. It's like you're always preparing for the party or the next thing. Yeah.
Which can be kind of exhausting if you think about it, right? But it's like when you have this in your natal chart, it's like, yeah, you're here to do a lot of things. You're here to like bring a lot of things to fruition, but because it's not the full moon phase yet, it's kind of like the rundown towards that, which is like, it's like almost it reminds me of a pregnant woman, which I've heard that the gibbous word, if you look at the etymology, don't quote me because I'm not super sure, but I remember my teacher telling me this. It's like, it means pregnancy, like the stage of the pregnancy you're about to give birth.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of what the moon looks like when it's in this phase. It's like, it's that in between half and full, where because the full moon is sort of like the birth. So yeah, like the waxing gibbous is sort of like that very full pregnant space, but like not quite there yet.
Right.
And then you think about like preparing for the baby even, and like just all the things you have to do. It's very much like this preparatory energy, which is, yeah, the analytical, the perfectionism, all kind of comes down to that. So that makes a lot of sense.
Interesting. And so then they come the full moon babies, right? Which is like, they're pretty noticeable, right? Full moon babies are just like, they're those people that you see kind of like walking into a room, just kind of, they carry that energy of like intensity,
Mhm.
and I don't mean that in a bad way, of course, but they just have that like, oh, I'm here,
Yeah.
I'm here. And the keywords are peak, awareness, fulfillment, opposition, right? Because they will have these kind of like encountered energies in their DNA automatically, because the sun and the moon are across the sky from each other. And this energy of like needing to balance those two sides of themselves will be a thing. It will be a thing. And we all come with certain imprints and certain strengths and weaknesses, and it's not that this is a weakness. It's more like it's just an energetic, thing, and you notice it in them. It's really
Oh,
funny because like,
definitely. Yeah.
do you notice the full moon babies right away? Like,
I don't know about right away, but it's always very, yeah, it's always very like obvious once I find out that someone's a full moon person. And yeah, there's this drama to them too. There's just like this, which same with the full moon. It's a dramatic time. We have literally like the peak of energy. And so to come in during that time, kind of speaks to that. You kind of hold that heightened energy within you. And I think also with that, the word like polarity comes to mind, and just polar, which is, similar to opposition, but it's like having to really reconcile two very different parts, but it's also like two sides of the same coin, in terms of the polarity between the two opposite signs. So yeah, it's a very striking energy for sure. Yeah.
yeah. And usually not always, but if people, like you were saying, the day chart, that night chart, all, planets over the horizon or in the horizon matter a lot. But usually there'll be full moon people are just like out there, they're like shown, they're not afraid of like show themselves, because in a way the full moon was the moon was totally illuminated, so they're like, I don't really care about putting myself out there. This is who I am.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next one is waning gibbous, and the keywords are dissemination, teaching, service, revealing. Yeah, like I said, that's an interesting one for me. Like I'm like kind of like, oh, okay,
I like
interesting.
teaching and service really make a lot of sense for me for this phase too, because it's like, okay, you had the full moon, you kind of had the show or the drama, what have you, the peak, and then from there you pass on that knowledge of what was understood. And if you think about it as like a plant, the full moon phase is the blossoming and the flowering. And the waning gibbous would sort of be like the harvest, right? Or you can like kind of take the seeds from it and pass it on. So yeah, it's similarly like passing on knowledge, passing on, the fruits of the harvest. That really rings true for me. Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying really resonates. It feels like these people come with a lot of knowledge already, like, because I believe in past lives. I like always look at the notes and all of that. I'm like kind of obsessed with that. So it just feels like these people come with all this knowledge, information from a past life. And so they're here to disseminate it, like disseminate it to other people. So it's actually a really nice space if you think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's almost
especially
like
when it's a trine.
It's like you did it, right? Like it's done.
Yeah. And that's kind of where the service comes in as well, or it's like, sharing for the sake of sharing, whether it's knowledge or what have you.
I really like that, actually. Thank you. Now it feels a little bit more like, okay, I got that. Okay, third quarter moon, integration, crisis, readjustment, and creativity, right? So the word creativity to me makes a lot of sense, because even though the moon is losing light at that time, this is definitely not a time for manifestation. It's creative because you're integrating all the knowledge from the cycle in a way, but there's the luminaries again are at odds, clashing with each other. And so this moment of crisis just feels very rich, very rich, in which we are being challenged to see things from a different perspective, right? Like I said, so these people come with that. These people come with that kind of like rebellious, different kind of like, maybe I'm not trying to project myself onto this because it's or maybe I am, I don't know. But I've noticed people from these that come with this moon phase, they just do things differently, because perhaps, like I said, it really matters on how the manifestation process works. But when this is a natal placement, these people just come here to like maybe teach others that there are different ways to do things, kind of like to dance. They kind of dance to the rhythm of their own drum in a way, because they do have that challenge energy inside of them, that challenging energy inside of them. And so Again, similar to the first quarter moon babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to integrate, they have to learn how to integrate sun moon placement. But once it's done, they become very creative, really really successful people, because like they've already mastered that, it's just like they have a lot of energy at their disposal, even though the moon was disseminating, right? It just feels like a dwell of energy to deal with difficult situations. So maybe these are the like crisis oriented people that are like also like those people that you call in a moment of emergency. Does that
Yeah.
resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, the crisis moment, that like pivot point, definitely speaks to being able to sort of take on challenges and in a creative new way, especially. Um, yeah, it's almost like this like acknowledgement of like an ending or the need for, change before the next cycle. And so I really like creativity for that, because it is about like integrating what has already happened, and then making decisions basically around like where to go next. um there's almost like it's reminding me of like the 7 and 8 of cups in the tarot, where it's like that sort of moment of like having to make a decision and not really being sure what decision to make, and then eventually like making a decision to kind of let go of what's not working and move forward anyway. um might be dealing with some sort of disappointments or something, but there's this need to go on. And yeah, that's kind of what's coming to me for like this last quarter phase and those type of people. It's just like, yeah, this acknowledgement of like change is a constant. Change is something that we're going to constantly be running into, and it's more about how we move with it, how we work with it.
Right. Great. So here I don't have the wait, let me see. Oh, here I don't have the waning crescent actually. But it feels like even deeper integration, even deeper, not under a crisis moment, but on like kind of like I'm okay with it moment in a way. Like so maybe the people that were born during this time, there's a sense of calm, or kind of like being okay with life, because they don't have like that like intensity, the intensity
Yeah,
has
it's
died
the
down,
acceptance or something.
like
Yeah.
surrender kind of. Well, I do have surrender for the balsamic moon activation. So
It's reminding me, it's making me think of like, again, kind of going back to the plant metaphor, of like, it's the plant is dying, but it has these like seeds left to, from the, after the harvest or whatever, there's still these seeds left to continue on its cycle. So the waxing, sorry, the waning, the waning crescent to me, it's like, makes me think of like leaving like the seeds kind of being left behind on the ground that will eventually, be reborn again into another plant. And yeah, maybe there is like this acceptance and I don't know. Yeah, calm is an interesting word. Um I feel like balsamic, or not balsamic necessarily, but waxing waning crescent moon people also have this very like service oriented vibe to them, where it's maybe not so much about them. It's kind of like what they're leaving behind for the future, or the collective. That's kind of what's coming to me, at least.
No, that resonates. That resonates. Because that's the moment of acceptance, you know? It's kind of like, yeah, I really like that actually.
If you have a waning crescent moon, you'll have to let us know what you think
Yes,
of our
please.
delineations.
And so then the balsamic moon, and the words are recharging, preparation, closure, surrender. Um, because yeah, this is, I feel like these are the people who need a lot of time alone, right?
Mhm.
Maybe a little introverted, right? Like there's a lot of like introspection. There's a lot of I mean, it might be difficult at first because it's like I'm not sure what my thing is. You know, it might take them a little while and a lot of introspection and a lot of self-study to figure out that it's in that space of stillness, of like full surrender when their most amazing magical moments come from, right?
Yeah.
But if they're like, oh, you know, why are full moon babies like the way they are? You know,
Yeah.
so that's why these people, I don't know, in my experience, this is one of those faces that might be just super, super mind blowing for them, you know, what I've noticed. Um, because it's definitely a very unique lunar energy to have.
Yeah, I agree. I think something I notice a lot with these type of people is that they just have to they have to come to terms with the fact that they kind of deal with endings a lot. You know, there's lots of acceptance around things ending. And yeah, like you said, tons of time and space for integration and just like alone time and processing. I find these people just like constantly processing what's going on and what's happening to them and around them. Um, and yeah, it's a very internal sort of energy I see these people having. Um, and yeah, surrender, acceptance and surrender are probably like the two big words for this phase. Yeah.
Yeah, so like if for those born in this phase, you know, and like in a way I also see them kind of like in a way, obviously it's not the same, but like the last quarter moon babies, I see them being very different, you know, like needing they're having very different needs than most people, having,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not a person that's very social or out there. It's like a person that's like an incubation kind of a soul that's in a process of incubation. That's what I'm downloading, you know?
Mm-hmm. Love that.
So,
Yeah.
yay. I
And we
love that
start
moon
over
phase, like I
again.
was saying. We start
Yeah.
all over again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think balsamic moon people are very special in that. And there's a lot of like wisdom that they hold. And it's really about them being able to, you know, have a lifestyle that that supports that, which, you know, our society, capitalist society doesn't really support being able to just like rest and think a lot, which is
Right,
what a lot
right.
of us need. Yeah.
Yeah, like some people be like, "Oh, why are you always alone? Why are you like have more friends?" And to me that's when astrology is just such a gift, you know, like not just the moon, but astrology in general. It's like
Hmm.
we're all coded differently,
Yeah.
and we're not all going to be doing the same thing at the same time, going to college and then meet someone and then get the ring and then the dog and then the, you know, it's like it doesn't work like that, right? And it also, sorry, I'm getting off topic, but I just like feel like people need to hear this.
Yeah.
So Um, and also, we're not old when we're 43.
Yeah.
A lot more stuff keeps happening, you know? So anyway, rant over.
No, you're right. There are definitely people who need to hear it for sure. Um, so yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about the progress moon cycle and the progress moon phases too, because that's something that I think a lot of people don't know much about. And there's so much richness in there when it comes to secondary progressions. And when it comes to secondary progressions, which is a timing technique that I'm like, how do I explain this? So I guess the way I tend to explain it is it's a technique that looks at sort of the unfolding of the birth chart by progressing the chart forward one day for each year of life. So I'm 30 years old. Let's say I'm 30 and a half years old, because I am close to 30 and a half. If I were to look at my progress chart, it would be a chart for 30 and a half days after my birth. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. And when we look at the progress moon phase, we're looking at where the moon, well, progress moon in general will show, where the moon is during that time. The moon will typically take about 2 to 3 years to move through a sign. Depends on the sign, really. Moves through some signs a little bit quicker, but about 2.5 years per sign, which provides a really nice backdrop to, if you're just looking at where you're at right now, even just looking at the sign that the progressed moon is in will kind of give you some clues to the general, vibe or mood of the time period that you're in. But then we look at the progressed moon phase in and of itself for a better look at, I would say, like a more pulled back perspective on the cycles that you're moving through. And again, we're looking at like years and not just like a couple, days, weeks, or months. So yeah. And I guess I'll just say before we go into it, when we're looking at the progressed lunar cycle and progressed moon phases, we're looking at the cycle of we're looking at the progress chart in and of itself. So where the sun and the moon and the progress chart are in relation to each other, not so much in relation to your natal placements, which can get kind of confusing. But I guess for an example, my progress sun is in Sagittarius. My progress moon is in Taurus currently. So I'm in a progress waxing gibbous phase, soon to be in a progress full moon phase. It's actually going to be a progress full lunar eclipse, because there was an eclipse about 30 some days after I was born. so yeah, looking at it that way, you want to look at where the progress moon and the progress sun is to determine the progress lunar phase. Did I say all that correctly?
Yeah. It's a fascinating subject. I'm obsessed with it. Ever since I found out about it when I started studying, it was just mind blowing. There are many other different techniques, but for me, there are like solar arcs and all this other stuff. For me, progressions are it. I mean, I don't know. Everyone has their own techniques and taste and all that stuff, but I almost never do a chart reading without looking at the progress chart, because I know why people are coming to me. Right? I mean, of course, transits and Saturn, right? It's always a Saturn transit, but yeah. So the progress chart is like a timing technique that brings the chart to the present moment, and it just speaks so much about where the person's at, right? Usually people will get blown away just knowing their sun sign changes.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, what? Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
That's more complexity, that's more layers. to a person's journey, right? Because, well, we're here to talk about the progressed moon. I don't want to get too far off topic, but depending on how long you live, you get to experience 3 sun signs, right? Like you say, you're a Sagittarius now. I'm a Capricorn because I'm older than you. But the reason why we look a lot at the progressed moon is like how you were saying, the moon changes signs every 2.5 years. The moon will move about 13 degrees per year, right? And so it is, and as the moon does that, of course, we look at the relationship to the progressed sun, right? But as the moon does that, it will trigger every single planet on your birth chart. And that's when like all these changes and moves and marriages, divorces, and kids, and all this stuff, sometimes all at once, will happen. And so it is kind of it just speaks a lot to your evolutionary process, right? Everything you've learned. And it's just so mesmerizing. I feel like I just love the progressed moon, because if I hadn't known that in my life, it would have been feeling very lost, like what's going on?
I feel like the progressed lunar return is such a big deal that people don't talk about enough. And that tends to start, it tends to start when you're 26, but usually by the time you're 27, it's like it exacts when you're 27, usually between 27 and 28. Depends on also where the moon is in the sign, right? Because if you have your moon really early in the sign, then it'll come a little bit earlier. Right. It'll start a little earlier, but yeah, the progressed lunar return really kind of like leads us into the Saturn return. And I find it to just it mirrors the Saturn return in so many ways, but it's a lot more, to me, it just tends to be a lot more body oriented and just like personal, personally oriented. I think of the Saturn return as creating or learning how to like reparent yourself on this more macro level in terms of like creating structure in your life and, taking on more responsibilities and all of that. But I find the progressed lunar return to kind of prepare us for that by making it so we have to take responsibility for our bodies and how we're taking care of ourselves and how we're, feeding ourselves and how we're nurturing and nourishing ourselves. I find it brings up a lot of that type of stuff ahead of the Saturn return.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's why the moon and Saturn have a special relationship, because the progressed moon cycle moves at the same pace as Saturn does. And so getting your Saturn return right really, really means getting your lunar return right first. And because the moon is so much about our sense of security, our inner selves, our needs, our stomach. The moon rules our stomach. If you haven't been eating well for years, if you haven't felt nurtured, if you haven't practiced enough self-care, which like self-care means different things for different people, right? If you haven't been doing that, the progressed lunar return is so key to make that adjustment. And then you will be able to get your Saturn return right. Not only the first Saturn return, but the second too, right? So yeah, and it's just a huge rite of passage that precedes the Saturn return. So it's like kind of like a double whammy in a sense of like, get ready. I mean, get aligned with your life, right? If you have been taking care of your moon, if you have been nurturing your moon, then you have better chances of dealing with the Saturn return, right? So yeah, I don't think people talk about it a lot. You see the Saturn return being literally everywhere now. And that's why my book originally wasn't going to include progressions. Because, you know, like you probably understand the way what I'm saying, but like you're given a certain amount of words, and this book was designed to be small. And so I was like, I have to talk about the progressed moon, because like for me, I mean, just in my practice, that's so key to where the person's at. And a lot of the times when people come to me, they're having some sort of lunation cycle thing, you know, like a balsamic, you know, because I guess that it's important to tell your audience too. I forgot to say that, you know, we touched on the transiting lunar cycle, which is about 29 days. We touched about the natal phase of the moon. But so when we talk about progressions, you can apply the information we gave you, but you have to be aware that these are years of your life, right? If you're in a balsamic moon phase, that's going to be 2.5 years of these like deep dive introspection, surrender. That's 2.5 years. That's a long time. And so,
and then another 2.5 of like trying to gain light again before it becomes a waxing crescent again. So yeah, that like balsamic to new moon, like 4 to 5 year period is so intense and so potent, I think. And again, it's not talked about enough. But yeah, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, no, so not to interrupt you, but like if you don't know you're going through a balsamic moon phase, everything can feel very disorienting, you know. Why are relationships ending? Why are big things, you know, my job of 10 years, or like just, it's because things are decomposing, you know, just so you can begin that process of magic. But that sometimes it's gonna involve seeing, you know, the ugly, just so you can be reborn again. You're like, well, when this is gonna end? And you're like, oh, it just started, you know. So
yeah, there's no light.
Just...
there's no light. It's just you're in the dark at that period of time. And with the moon speaking so much to our body, and you know, we didn't really touch on it too much, but kind of, but the moon phases too also speak to, you know, just natural amounts of like energy that you have to do things. And so when you're in this progressed phase where there's not a lot of light, when it's like waning, then you might just in general find less energy, you know, in your body or in just in your day to day to be able to do all the things. And that's okay. I think probably people who are born during like, you know, full moon phase, full moons or waxing, you know, gibbous maybe might find those periods a lot more difficult of like, you know, lessening and less light and less energy. I look at progressed moon phases, but definitely not as much. It's not something I work with a ton, but one thing I am really interested in when I do look at them is for fertility, actually, which is an area of astrology that I'm very obsessed with and will likely spend a lot more time working with over the next couple of years. I want to start doing more research around that, but yeah, it's something I learned from Kelly Surtees, who works with progressions a lot. And she basically talked about, you know, looking at the progressed moon phase for fertility. And if the moon is, you know, waxing and growing in light, then that's going to be a more fertile time, and a time where your body is going to be more likely to be able to carry, you know, a baby to term, as opposed to, you know, balsamic moon phase or even new moon phase when there's no light to the moon. It will likely be more difficult. And I've run into that with clients who, you know, I had a client once who was like, you know, we've been trying for the past 2 years and nothing's happened. And, you know, we're spending so much money on IVF and all these things. And I'm like, I know this sounds, and of course she was a little older, in her like late 30s. So I was like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but she was in a balsamic moon phase for that time that she was trying. So I was like, you're actually going to be a lot more, you're more likely to be successful in like 6 months to a year from now when the moon, your progressed moon has some light. And that's hard to kind of reckon with. And you're like, well, I'm 38 and time's running out. Right. But yeah, it does often come down to that. It's like, timing is everything.
Well, that's very interesting. I don't work with fertility. Uh, so I'm gonna send you the people that come to me. Sometimes I get, I
Cool.
get those. But that that makes so much sense to me because the moon is the mother,
Yeah. And
right?
the
Like
womb
obviously,
space.
and the womb, and that, like, it makes a lot of sense to me. So, and I have worked with the moon enough to know that if you're going, because I put it to test in my own life, just because, like, that's the gift of being an astrologer. You see how, like, obviously we all have different charts and approach astrology in different ways, right? That's beautiful. But sometimes you really want to put things to test yourself with your own life to see how things work. And like I've tried to work with that, like trying to bring to fruition something when the moon says no, or a south node or
Mm-hmm.
connection, and it really just doesn't. It just like
Yeah.
something happened that it just didn't work out. And so that's why lunar energy is so important for everyone to work with, and not just in like the process of manifestation, but like you said, even with fertility, it just matters so much. And it's a matter of time, a lot of the times. um and it's not even just the sun moon lunar cycle. It's also like the progressed moon touching Pluto, conjunct Pluto, the progressed moon
Mm-hmm.
conjunct Jupiter. That's a good one for pregnancy, for
Yeah.
fertility. But yeah, I mean, it's never ending, right? But I'm fascinated with the subject. So
Yeah. I want to kind of like close up or wrap up by talking a little bit more about the progressed moon phases. And we can kind of just we talked a little bit about, the balsamic moon and the new moon, but yeah, I want to talk about kind of like the quarters. So from new moon to first quarter and the progress cycle, what can people kind of expect during those 7 years, basically?
from the new to the
The first quarter.
from the new to the first quarter, well, just a lot of momentum. I mean, maybe not
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning because the moon still doesn't have light. You kind of, I mean, this thing is a little complicated because you have to look at the degrees,
Mm-hmm.
like certain degrees and stuff like that. You also need to know where your progressed sun is, right? So, but in these 7 years, it's just like slowly but surely, like gaining momentum. Things start to materialize. Your career starts taking off, maybe, or like,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you meet someone and you're like slowly getting more serious and serious, right? So it's like momentum charging ahead, like having kind of like the wind at your back, right? Of course, there are many other players in the chart, but alone that speaks of like forward momentum and getting higher, higher, higher
Mm-hmm.
towards fulfillment. Well, not yet, right? Because it's like the quarter, but you're starting to get momentum. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I definitely that resonates with me and my experience of that time. I just remember the the balsamic moon phase for me was like a Scorpio moon because my progressed sun's in Sag is in Sag. I just remember that being so hard, just like one of the most difficult times of my life. And then slowly, yeah, the 7 years that preceded that, or proceed, whatever, the 7 years that came after that, was definitely sort of this like slow build out of that really dark phase. Getting a first job and, starting to just like become my own person. And that was a really important time. Yeah. Yeah. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Same here. Like my balsamic moon, the last was a brutal.
yeah, it can be really hard.
Same thing.
Yeah. But you move through it. You move through it. Um, and
Well,
then you see
because
the light.
there's a new beginning coming, right? So
Yeah.
it's like those 2 years, or those months, they're long. But the good news for people who go through that, which we're all going to go through it, right, at some point or
Mm-hmm.
another, it's knowing that there's something lurking under the surface. And it's actually, I see that as like a reinvention, because the
Mm-hmm.
balsamic book is about going back to your essence. And that's why everything else falls apart,
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
have to go back to your essence. And it is in that connection to your essence when you're going to reinvent yourself.
I love that. Yeah. And then we have our the next quarter phase, we'll say from the first quarter moon to the full moon, which is what I'm in right now. And yeah, how would you describe those next kind of 7 years between the first quarter and the full?
Super busy.
Yeah.
Everybody
Very
wants a
busy.
piece of you. Everybody wants a piece of you. And you want to do everything, right? Because it's like, oh, and that this is a time for manifestation and heading
Mhm.
towards success, or, and even if you don't see something as success, it's just you're about to give birth to, like, something meaningful that your name will be attached to, right? It could even be a baby, like you were saying.
Mhm. Yeah.
It could literally mean a baby. It could mean a book. It could be a new career, heading towards. So it's even more active. It's incredibly busy
Mm.
time, incredibly busy years of your life. But that's when you work hard, because you know that things are going to manifest, or things are going to come to an end, right?
And you have the
During the
energy to like put behind it during that time too, I find.
Totally, you will have a lot of drive. You will have a lot of drive inside of you, and your body will tell you, because you have so many opportunities coming at you, right? Your body will tell you which are, because the moon rules the body. It's like your body will tell you which are um, the right ones to go, because, like, you will have to make some decisions, right, at some point during that
Mhm.
process. um Busy years.
Yeah, yeah, I can attest to that for sure. Um, yeah, and then the full moon phase comes, and that's always exciting because yeah, that's the main event. That's like the 2 years or so where you're kind of probably more visible, or just kind of like doing the most, right?
Very visible, yeah, because you have the light of your progressed sun shining on you, right? And so it's not even your natal sun, it's your new you. It's like your new sense
Mm-hmm.
of self, that it's lighting you up. Here you are. Maybe that's when your social media blows up, or maybe that's
Yeah.
when um you're all over the place, right? Your name's in places, and enjoy that, right? Because it's not that you're not going to be successful later, but things might tone down after that. They
Mm-hmm.
probably will.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you're not going to be doing things, but definitely you this is the climax moment. But the good thing is, this
Definitely.
moment is pretty long. So that's what's exciting too.
Yeah. I'm excited. My full moon phase starts in August. And then I'll be in it for basically 2 years until August 2024. And then also my sun shifts then too. So, or it shifts in like 2025. So I get
To
like
what?
to Capricorn. Yeah.
Oh
So I'll have
boy.
a Capricorn
That
sun, Cancer moon. I think that's when I'm going to have kids, honestly. That's when I predicted for myself. Um, yeah. So which will
well, I
mean a
must,
slowdown for
right.
sure.
I went through the same, because we're both Scorpios. the transition to Capricorn was really hard for me.
Yeah.
I'm still dealing with it. I mean, my progress sun is in, I think I only had 2 Capricorn, but
Okay.
that whole time, that whole year was just like, it's gonna sound weird and it's gonna sound like I'm putting Capricorns in a box, but I'm not, because I love Capricorns, but all I do is work.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still getting a handle on my schedule. I feel like I'm just getting there. And that's because my husband had conversations with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
About like,
Oh,
all you do is work,
that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
which is the
Yeah.
shadow side of Capricorn, But that was a
Yeah.
tough transition because you go from Jupiter to Saturn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm curious to see what it's going to be like for me. I'm predicting that's when I become a parent, because I don't know, Capricorn to me is very parental energy, and also
Mhm.
the progressed moon will be in Cancer, which is my 5th house of
Oh,
children.
perfect.
And I also have a bunch of transits happening that kind of speak to that too. But yeah, we'll see. I'm very, very curious about it, but I have lots to do before that. But yeah, so going from the full moon then to the waning or the last quarter moon, that next 7 years is, I'm assuming, like lots of yeah, like slowing down and sort of like preparing for that next pivot.
Yeah, it just feels like energy dying down, right? Like I said, it will really matter about what happened in the full moon phase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you feel like, maybe I didn't say you will, but maybe you feel like, I did it. I
Mm-hmm.
did it. I did it. I don't care anymore. I'm done. Now it's time for me to take a vacation. Maybe it's time for me to work less. Um, or it could be like, not necessarily negative, but it could be like, if it depends on what happened. But I mean, it could also be feeling like a moment of loss, like things getting up start, because eventually you will have to do the balsamic. I know this is a long time, but I mean, dissemination just means getting rid of, cleaning up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some projects and some relationships, and you're like cleaning house slowly but surely. And that
Mm-hmm.
process depends on a lot of things, right? A lot on your birth chart and the houses. Is it an angular house, right? Is it like, it depends, right? But we're
Mm-hmm.
all different. And I do think that the position of the moon, the position of that phase, but also the house, says a lot about what are the things that are going to be going away, right? It's not the same thing
Mm-hmm.
having the progressed moon disseminating in the 10th house that having it in the second, 6th
Mm-hmm.
house, right? So yeah, it's just this process of cleaning up the party that you had, whether that party was fun or you're hungover. Um, um,
Yeah. And I would imagine that like the teaching aspect of it too, just kind of like yeah, like you said, disseminating and sharing the harvest, really.
right. Yeah, sharing the harvest, or also helping someone who had gone through or is going through a similar situation, which I
Mm-hmm.
think happens a lot, right? What I've noticed with the moon is you will attract women who are in the same progressed lunation or are in the
Mm-hmm.
same like lunar cycle. So my progressed moon's in Pisces right now, well, which I love. Well, except for all the crying, but
Yeah. There was so much crying when I had that.
seriously, it's like, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's just the thing, it's a weekly thing. Um, a lot of progressed Pisces moon people come to see me right now. So
Cool.
you attract women moon, right? That
Mm-hmm.
have, so in this progression, you could be teaching, helping them kind of attune to that sign's energy, or that or something lunar, something very private, something very close to your heart, just something. So yes, the teaching aspect really comes in there, I think, and that brings you closer to people. It's just that literally happened to me it's been happening to me very recently, like attracting women with like certain family situations, and then you're like, oh my god, I wanted the same, let me help you out, let me hold your hand, or at least just hearing.
Yeah. Love that. And then yeah, we kind of talked about this, but that last sort of phases between the last quarter and the new moon is really just more of that like letting go. And I would say sort of, yeah, that drawing inward and preparing for darkness and the kind of like great stuff that can come in the darkness that you can't get when you're out and about doing all the things. You have to be still, and you have to be very present for that. It's like a death phase, really, that the end and it's not the end of everything, but it's the end of a pretty major, nearly 30-year cycle. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's the end of the now you, right? And there will be a new you. But in this phase, it's really, really important to find guidance in anything, in what the divine feminine means to you, right? Like tarot, astrology, human design, anything that speaks to you, psychic abilities, whatever speaks your mind, whatever speaks to you, right? Even for people who are already in it. Because if some people are so like, it's like, oh my god, I'm already like so into this, well, more, you know more transformation, and really I feel like this phase of the balsamic moon progression, it's just really about knowing to let go, because things will leave, people, jobs, situations, and if you hold on to them, that's when it's, because it's the moon and it just feels so personal, it's really about letting go.
Makes
which
sense,
is hard.
yeah. So hard.
But it is a magical time. It's just that we are taught that that's not okay. It's not okay to lock yourself in your room to consult the tarot for 5 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's
so
where
necessary.
The magic is.
Yeah. Awesome. Any closing thoughts on the progressed moon cycle? Anything else you want to share, or just moon in general before we start to wrap up?
Totally. I would say that the progress chart, I guess I'm just going to kind of wrap it up all together. It functions as a second chart. So the transits are also going to affect your progressions. So that's why it's really, like I said, the progressed moon is a lot of it, right? Because it's going to move faster, but you will have Saturn squaring your progressed Venus, or you're going to have Mercury going retrograde on your progressed Mars and things like that. And so the progress chart also works as another, I always look at it in relationship to the natal chart, always. But the transits work the same way into the progress chart from what I've gathered. So it can get kind of crazy, but then you start getting used to it. And I just see my natal chart as my DNA, like my astral DNA, I call it. And I see my progress chart as my new me, kind of like the new version that I've built for myself, and they both get transits. So it's kind of fun to like always see, where are your new planets, and just like adding in more layers of complexity.
Amazing. Awesome. I'm like excited to dig into my progress chart. after this. I haven't looked at it in a minute. Thank you so much for joining me and talking about the moon for the past 2 hours.
Of course, it's my pleasure. I really had a really good time. So I'm thankful that you invited me. Thank you so much, because I just love doing this. So
Awesome.
yay.
Do you want to let people know where they can find you, your website, your socials, all the things?
Sure, yes. Well, first of all, yeah, you can buy my book pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
It has really beautiful illustrations that I just love art. So my website is naramon.com. That's kind of like my aka, my Naramon. And I have many different readings. Like I was saying, bird chart paintings. And I have a newsletter that goes out too, in which obviously I will be promoting the podcast. And my social, I only have one social, and it's Instagram. And my handle is Narayana Montúfar, just like my name, no periods. And I do post pretty regularly, a lot about the moon, but I also post a lot about, mantras and videos and just whatever crosses my mind. But by the way, happy Jupiter Neptune conjunction.
Oh, yeah. Happy Jupiter Neptune. Yeah. I'm excited about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So, yeah, but it was a
Awesome.
pleasure to talk to you. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining.